I'd like to introduce our moderator, Max Kraus. Max is a senior manager with the firm who specializes in audit and works on a variety of engagements ranging from financial statement compilations and reviews to audits and attestation services, working primarily with not-for-profit and manufacturing clients. Max also performs numerous benefit plan audits, including 401k plans, health and welfare plans, pension plans, and multi-employer plans. He works closely with plan sponsors and assisting them with the DOL and ERISA compliance matters. I'll pass it off to Max to get things started and introduce our presenter.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Max Kraus. As Allie mentioned, I'm an auditor, and so I like to think that I can help clients with a lot of their questions on financial statements and accounting issues, but that's not always where the most complex, concerns can arise. I think of HR as kind of like the glue that holds an organization together. So I'm lucky enough to have Kathleen Schneider, who I'll introduce in a moment, to reach out to for guidance. When I asked Kathleen to kind of give an update on what the HR landscape looks like for 2025 for not-for-profits, I didn't realize there'd be so many changes coming out of Washington in the last couple of weeks that would completely change the landscape. So Kathleen was nice enough not only to accept, but also to kind of pivot, and is going to touch base on some of those changes. So real quick background on Kathleen. She has over 25 years of HR consulting experience in providing human resource support for companies ranging from 5 to 500 plus employees in a wide array of industries, including manufacturing, healthcare, customer service, technology, insurance, not-for-profits, and retail. There's probably some others in there too that I missed. She is the director of training and development for Clark Schaefer Hackett's Strategic HR brand, which provides outsourced human resource services, including but not limited to recruitment, benefits and compensation, compliance and record keeping, consulting, whether that's creating a certain culture, creating a communication strategy, what information do you deliver, who do you deliver it to, how do you deliver it, and also on difficult issues such as complaint investigations. They help with training and development, whether that's team building, leadership and management training, or creating a collaborative workforce. And say you have someone in your HR team that leaves suddenly, whether that's a key position or support position, they are there to help with short-term or long-term transition. So before I hand it over to Kathleen, we do have a quick polling question to kind of kick things off and kind of try to make this a little bit interactive. So I'll go forward one slide. What are your top HR concerns as we get into 2025? So I'll read them here. Changes in regulations, hiring, finding the right talent, engagement and retention, remote versus in-person work, or developing employees. Let's give everyone a moment to respond there. Just kind of curious to see what the top concerns are for this audience.
Max, I'll chime in and say, quite frankly, it can also be on depending on what the given day is. As you mentioned, we started talking about this webinar, back in October, and it's been changing fast and furious ever since. I think we've had to update things a few times. So I also appreciate that, things can change rapidly.
Oh, I didn't mean to select that. Let's see. Well, we'll go to show the answer. So almost 36 of you said changes in regulations. So next was hiring, finding the right talent. So with that, Kathleen, I'll kick it over to you.
Sounds good. And these responses that we're hearing from the group on the call today, that's kind of what we've been seeing from clients as well. And the regulations, honestly, 3 weeks ago, probably would have been further down on the list. But there's been a lot going on coming out of Washington. So I figured that's where we would kick things off. But just to kind of give us an overview of what our discussion today, we're going to talk a little bit about compliance updates. There's been a whole lot of executive orders coming out of Washington, and what does that mean? What does that impact? We'll talk about hiring and retention. That often has been the highest priority for so many organizations. We'll talk about the RTO, the return to office. It's hitting the headlines. We're hearing so much about it. That's a big thing with what the federal government is doing right now of calling people back to the office. We get a lot of questions. Should I, shouldn't I? We'll talk that through a little bit. We also will talk a little bit about engagement and culture and also employee leadership and development. And then I can't do a session on navigating the HR landscape without spending a little bit of time on AI and HR and what does that mean. I read last week that a recent survey that 64% of businesses said that hiring retention was their number one concern. That was maybe 2.5 weeks ago before some of these executive orders really started to hit. But let's dive in. All right, what's coming out of Washington? Let me please say first and foremost, I am not an attorney. To be clear, I am not giving legal advice in any way, shape, or form. My intent here is to share what we are being told by the various legal partners that we work with, other human resources, HR resources that we use, and also what we're hearing from our clients. There have been a flurry of executive orders in the first days of the Trump administration. We're 3 weeks in now. For today's session, I'm primarily going to focus on the ones that impact employment. And quite frankly, I'm going to skim the surface on these because we could do probably the entire hour just on these. I've sat in on many of the entire hour just on these executive orders, but I'm going to skim the surface some and just kind of fill you in. I also wanted to just mention one of the executive orders that is impacting a lot of nonprofits especially, and some for-profit businesses too. There was an executive order that basically halted funding. I know we've been hearing from a lot of clients that we work with. I see Bhumika Patel is on the call from Columbus. Thanks for joining us, Bhumika. I know you've been hearing from people. We've been hearing a lot of this. There was basically the executive order halted funding for any organization, nonprofit or for-profit, that was receiving government funding. So government contractors, many nonprofits, things of that nature. A stay was put in place by a judge that halted that executive order. So in theory, the flow of funding should have resumed. From what we're hearing from sources, that's not entirely believed to be happening. There was actually another judge's order that, again, directed the federal government, basically said the EO is not legal, the executive order, and directed the federal government to resume that flow. Honestly, we're hearing some conflicting stories about that. But I also wanted to make sure and mention that to the nonprofits that we've got here today, because I fully appreciate how much that is impacting so many of you. One of the big ones that we're seeing is there was an executive order that was related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Basically, what this did was revoked an executive order 11246 that has been in place since Lyndon Johnson. It's been in place since, I believe it was 1965. That established affirmative action program requirements and established that federal contractors created an equal opportunity for women and minorities in the opportunities that they have, both hiring and the opportunities within their organization. And with that 11246, organizations had to be able to document that they were doing that. The executive order, the recent executive order, has rescinded all of that. So it's eliminated any affirmative action requirements for federal contractors. When we talk about federal contractors, it's also important to realize that if you are receiving grants, you are considered to be, you fall under this, you are considered to be a federal contractor. Many organizations, we've talked to different organizations where a specific program you may have had, a specific position you may have had, maybe was directed towards, and to an extent, it may have been the terms of the grant, was directed towards DEI efforts. Those efforts have had to be stopped. Additionally, we're also getting questions and things about, well, the grant that I have isn't necessarily directed to DEI, but my organization has DEI programming. That's a little bit in question of whether that is going to impact whether your grant is still valid. The biggest thing that I can recommend on that is work with your attorney to see the status of your grants. We fully appreciate that there's a lot in flux right now, and there's a lot of questions and all of those kind of things. This one has not been rescinded in any way, shape, or form, so it is still in effect. And it basically, the intent of this executive order is, quote unquote, ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. It's intended to ensure that federal civil rights laws are enforced to the benefit of all Americans and to end illegal diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility efforts. So that is the intention of this executive order. The way it's impacting organizations has definitely been significant. It also ordered the OFCCP, which is the organization that enforces those federal contracts and enforces those requirements of federal contracts, are basically any enforcement of those are stopped, of that affirmative action or DEI clause that may have been in place for your contracts or your grants. That any enforcement of that is stopped. It also encourages the private sector employers to eliminate illegal DEI discrimination and preferences. So while it doesn't go as far as for private sector employees as rescinding anything, it is, I don't know that it can, but it is strongly encouraging private sector employers to do so. It's presenting challenges for a lot of employers. It's presenting, what do we do? Is my funding still valid? It's presenting a lot of questions. So that's one of the big things that I know many of you are probably dealing with at this point in time. The impact on nonprofits is your DEI initiatives are now prohibited. If it is determined that you may have DEI initiatives, you could lose your grant. So, just contact your attorney, work with your attorney to see what the best course of action is for your organization. Because it is definitely, particularly for nonprofits that I know rely on so much of that funding and things from the federal government through grants and things, it can have a significant impact. Okay, moving on a little bit, also DEI related, is that there was an executive order that revoked a previous executive order under the Biden administration, 13672, that basically this previous executive order prohibited discrimination against sexual orientation and gender identity. The new executive order with the Trump administration essentially recognizes two sexes as far as the federal government, male and female. And it prohibited employees of the federal government from having their pronouns noted, say on their email addresses. It also impacts intimate places, the restrooms, the locker rooms, things of that nature. As you know, it's not uncommon that many organizations had kind of shifted to accommodate sexual preference or gender identity. This executive order prohibits all of that. Impact on nonprofits. I'm not seeing anything yet, but definitely keep an eye on this one. It could very well trickle down to federal contractors and other employers. Right now, this executive order is only impacting federal employees. And also check your state laws too, because some states have specific laws regarding this area. As we're talking about these DEI efforts and these discrimination efforts, keep in mind on both of these, the Civil Rights Act of 1967 is still in force. It is illegal to discriminate against any of the protected statuses that are recognized in all of the pieces of legislation that contribute to that. So we're talking sex, race, age, religion, nationality, disability, color, veteran status, pregnancy status. There are numerous pieces of legislation that protect those. And those are all still in force. Several Supreme Court decisions have codified sexual orientation and gender identity as falling under sex as a protected status. It boils down to continue your efforts to create a respectful work environment. At the end of the day, we want to provide a respectful work environment and a positive work experience for our employees. As we get into more about retention and things, that's what so much of it's about. So our advice is to continue your efforts to do so. We may have to frame it a little differently to comply with these orders. Right now, what we're seeing with anything that is tied to DE&I has a target on it. You may want to put a different lens on it, but at the end of the day, the goal is what it has always been, to create a positive, respectful work environment. As we continue, as we all know, there have also been a number of executive orders, and there's been a lot of activity with regard to immigration. Many of us were hearing a lot of that. We're hearing about ICE raids and all of those kind of things. The best thing that we can recommend for any employer, nonprofit, for-profit, whoever you might be, is to have a plan. Work with your attorney, or there's a lot of different resources out there. I know we've worked with some clients and things. Have a plan. What can we do if ICE shows up at my door? What do we do? And make sure, if you have a plan in place, when they show up, it's going to make it a little easier. Not saying it's not going to be stressful, but know your rights as an organization, know your employees' rights. Sometimes I've seen organizations go so far as to provide resources for their employees to help them understand their rights. Something else that is coming up, your I-9s, your employment eligibility verification forms. Make sure your I-9s make sure you've had them audited. I mean, it's a good idea to do this every couple of years anyway, but make sure all your ducks are in a row with regard to your I-9s and things. Depending on your organization and who your organization serves, it may be your clients that are being impacted. I know we're hearing some of that from organizations that we work with. The organization itself may be not so vulnerable, but their clients are. Have a plan. How are you going, as an organization, how are you going to handle that? It may look like education for your clients. It may look like providing referrals to resources. Sometimes if your organization doesn't work in that area, referring them to another organization. Sometimes it can be mental health support. This is stressful for a lot of folks. So have a plan on your end, whether it's impacting your organization, whether it's impacting the clients that you serve. How are you going to handle those? And how are you going to handle that when those types of issues come up, whether it's ICE walking in the door or whether it's a client that you're working with or something that is having a particularly difficult time. Okay. Next poll we have.
Yeah. So do you anticipate any hiring in 2025? So no, we won't be hiring. Unsure, may depend on turnover. Of course, that's always an issue. Yes, we're hiring 1 to 3 people. Yes, we expect to hire more than 3 people. So this is kind of interesting to get a pulse on what the labor market may look like in 25. About 75% of attendees have responded. I'll open it up for just a couple more seconds, give everyone a chance to respond. Okay. Okay, 32.6% said yes, we're hiring 1 to 3 people. So that's a great sign. Happy to see that.
Yeah, definitely. And 27% said even more than 3 people. It's great to hear. I know hiring is, a lot of organizations had paused hiring the last, say, year or so. As much, we were hearing a lot about economic uncertainty, election uncertainty. What were things starting to look like? I know our recruiting team is starting to see things pick up, that more and more of our clients and people are approaching us looking for some help with their hiring. So, that's good to see. All that being said, I will say from what I'm hearing, and my team knows I read a lot. I read probably way too much. But with all these executive orders and with the level of activity coming out of Washington, the confidence that people had maybe before January 20th, there's a little bit more uncertainty with that. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. But yeah, I've been very pleased to see that hiring is starting to pick up again. It can be very industry dependent as well. So let's dive into that a little bit. So back last summer or so, we were starting to hear about the big stay. When there was some of that uncertainty, economic uncertainty, inflation, the elections, all of that. A lot of folks had decided they just felt better to stay where they are, kind of stick with the devil you know, and not with the devil you don't know, as far as putting yourself out there and look for a new position. So, that we were experiencing the big stay. But even with the election behind it, as I mentioned, there's still a little bit of uncertainty. And all that being said, employers that are hiring, it's still hard to find the right talent. A survey that was done, I believe this is November, 60% of employees have said they'll be looking for a new job in 2025. We're seeing that number hold kind of steady. But companies are having a hard time finding the right talent. And especially there was the jobs report, I think just earlier this week, unemployment was down another tick at 4%. They may be getting candidates, but the candidates that they're getting don't have the skill sets that they need. So many employers are looking at upskilling or reskilling their current employees. Additionally, there's a lot of research and things in that 60%, the resume template survey, 1,200 employees were surveyed, and 27% at that time back in November had already started looking. 13% said they'd start by the end of the year, and 16% said they were going to start after the first of the year. So keep an eye on that, and we're going to talk about some of the upskilling and reskilling and what exactly that looks like. There's been, looking at some late 2024, the Society of Human Resource Management research, the supply and demand is still the top recruiting challenge at this point. And 60% said they were having a low number of applicants. 55% said the competition they were seeing from other employers. 46% were seeing an increase in candidate ghosting, as in you engage the candidate, maybe you schedule a phone interview or you schedule the in-person interview and the candidate just never shows up and you never hear from him again. We are still experiencing some of that. So, that's not that, we've been hearing that for a while. The candidate skills are also a challenge. 40% of employers surveyed said candidates had insufficient work experience, 37% were lacking in the technical skills, and 30% said they were missing the right soft skills.
Hey, Kathleen, just real quick on that, we had a question in the chat. Is that all industries or just not-for-profit employees?
This is all industries. This is all industries.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah. So one of the things that we are working with, that we're seeing with a lot of employers, and we're working with a number of employers to do, is identifying skills gaps. What skills do your employees have, and what are the gaps? Conducting a skills gap analysis can help you do that. It starts with what are your needs? What are the needs of the organization? Looking at your job descriptions. It starts with all of those, and then kind of looking at the people you have. How do those individuals, can I move people around? Can I reassign some tasks, things like that, to people who maybe have skills, maybe have the skills that I need. That skills gap analysis can provide you insights on your entire workforce. It also is an opportunity to evaluate individual learning and development, and it can help you out with some workforce planning. That skills gap analysis can help you narrow in your recruiting efforts. How many of you have ever, you start to recruit a job and you think you know what you need, but then the further you get into the search or the more you're talking to candidates and things, well, no, maybe that's not what we need. Maybe we need to revisit that. Do that before you start the search. And by doing this skills gap analysis, that can help you do that. I was just talking to our director of recruiting today at Strategic HR, and he's got a client now that they're well into the search, and now the client is starting to go, we've kind of looked at this and I think we need to reframe it. I would recommend do that before you start the search. You'll save a lot of time and money. Also that skills gap analysis can help you create a competitive advantage. When you're finding, and it's not always, as I mentioned, it's not always easy to find the right talent. We still see a lot of organizations that use what we like to call the post and pray method, that you put it on one of the job boards or you put it on your website and you just hope people are going to apply. In this job market, and we've actually been saying this for the last few years, but even now, even though the job market's not quite as tight as maybe it was a year ago or a year and a half ago, it's still, you still have to get a little creative. I encourage people to get out and network. Where are the candidates that you're looking to find? Are there professional organizations? Is it through colleges and universities? What contacts do you have? Who do you have in your network that might know someone? That's probably one of the biggest ways that we are both as I'm talking to organizations and as I'm talking to individuals that are job searching. It's the network. It's who you know, and who the people you know, who they know. It's that whole network of things that is really key to being able to fill positions. Engaging with schools. A lot of schools, colleges, and universities, yes, they have their current students and upcoming grads. They also work with their alumni and building contacts and things at the schools. Leveraging internships and co-ops. That's a great way, depending on the level of skill you need for the position that you have, but you can you bring in an intern or co-op, and it's a good opportunity to kind of get a sense of their skills and where they might fit into the organization. And quite frankly, a lot of times you can do it at a little less cost than hiring a full-time employee, if that meets your needs. Looking at what makes my organization attractive to work. Why would somebody want to come work here? when I'm working with organizations, if we're talking about recruiting, that's one of the first questions I ask. Why would somebody want to come work here? Do you have an answer to that question? I encourage candidates to ask that in an interview. So just keeping that in mind, think outside the box. Don't stay stuck to the way we've always done it. As we're kind of working our way through here on our agenda today, these next three areas, honestly, they all kind of, I use the circles because they all kind of feed back and forth to one another. There were separate, we've used separate questions along the way, but all of these areas kind of mix and mingle. And so one of the important things is identifying why someone want to work for your organization. A lot of times, once you've done that, that's also the reason they want to stay. That's also the reason that they're engaged and care about the work that they're doing. So looking at it from a holistic perspective, for many nonprofit organizations, the reason on that may very well be your mission and the people you serve and contributing to the community. But that may not be all. And so look at the bigger picture. It's great to have a great mission, but if people don't work well together, or it's not a good team, or people don't get along, that's gonna still hold you back. So look at all of these things. Why would someone want to work for your organization? What makes your organization attractive? Are you offering employees what they want? Is it fair pay? For a while there, fair pay had dropped in the rankings of what employees want. With inflation and things, we're seeing that rise to the top again. And I fully appreciate with nonprofits, this can be tricky. I appreciate you've got limited funding and things. But look at that and position yourself as well as you can when it comes to pay. I've had a couple of nonprofits that I've worked with that, unfortunately, the rate of pay they could offer were lower than what somebody could get working at fast food or something. That can be challenging to overcome. So believe me, I've worked with plenty of nonprofits. Strategic HR has. We get those funding challenges, but look at it from the lens of what can we do here? In addition to pay, there's also, do they have an opportunity to learn and develop? Show them how they can grow. Show them the opportunity that you'll have and how they'll be able to interact with maybe a certain demographic of the population that they can be passionate about. Help them see, I know when I've been involved in various nonprofits, the opportunity to help somebody is incredibly satisfying. And if you can send somebody out and they feel more confident, or you've helped them out, that can go a long way too. And, obviously, leverage that. Do you offer flexible hours? Do they have to be in the office? Can they work remote? Employees want flexibility so that they can meet their personal needs and priorities as well. It's not just about work. Employees want to know, well, I have a doctor's appointment at 10 o'clock. Can I adjust my schedule? Or, can I work from home? I'm expecting the plumber to come. Employees are looking for that kind of flexibility. And is that something that your organization can offer? Can you offer a healthy work-life balance? That we work a lot with organizations and nonprofits, and I know many of them that we work with, a big topic of conversation is stress and burnout. And how can you help your employees mitigate that? What are some things that your organization can offer to help them mitigate that? There's passion for the mission, and that's fantastic. But you also need to temper that a little bit with recognizing your employees need to step away. They need to take care of themselves. And what can you do to support that? And then, of course, as we've mentioned all along, just connecting what the role will be and what that individual will be doing with the mission of the organization. That also can go a long way as what does my organization offer? So I do encourage everybody, when, if you're doing hiring, put that lens on it. What can I offer? What's going to make my organization attractive? Even attractive compared to other nonprofits, where, it's not a very big candidate pool at this point in time. Okay, let's keep going. I mentioned employee engagement, and all of this works in. You want to have a good work environment to be able to attract people, to keep the people that you have. And that's been a huge challenge for employers. I read a survey just not too long ago. I was at the HR conference last fall, the Ohio HR conference, and a survey that was shared, 49% of employees feel invisible or unheard. I'm not going to lie, that breaks my heart. And what can we do about that? Gallup has been doing an employee engagement survey since the early 2000s. We've been stuck between about 30 and 33%. If anybody pays attention to HR at all and HR issues, we've been talking about engagement, it feels like forever, to the point it's gotten a little cliche, but we're not moving the needle. That's the hard part. And you do that one little step at a time. Only 23% of employees have had meaningful feedback in the past week. All of those things, the helping employees feel visible and heard, providing feedback, those are all things we can control. And those don't take money that I know sometimes can be a challenge. It doesn't take extra funding that I know sometimes can be a challenge for nonprofits. So let's look a little bit about how do we do that? Well, it helps to look at it from an employee's perspective. Gallup, again, conducts this research annually, and they basically boiled it down to 4 areas. What are employees looking for? Do they have an opportunity to do their best every day? Look at your employees from that lens. Do they have an opportunity to do their best? Do they have, what does that mean to them? What do they want out of their role? To contribute, to feel like they're making a difference, whatever that might be. Do they have the tools and resources that they need? Do they have the training and the knowledge? And again, I appreciate with nonprofits, funding is limited, but sometimes that training and those resources can be others, and sharing that information. That's one of the biggest tools that nonprofits have. So are you meeting that need? Does their boss or others at work care about them as a person? Does somebody care about them? We talk a lot about, I've said this so many times in the last couple of years, everybody has their stuff, and being able to provide a little bit of empathy, when we're interacting with our employees, understanding, hey, your daughter was sick. How's your daughter feeling? Just little things like that. Does somebody care about them as a person? Getting to know what's important to your employees can make a huge difference. Do they feel like they're contributing to the organization's mission? Helping connect those dots. And then lastly, have they had that chance to learn and grow in the past year? Sometimes I find with employees, as a leader, we feel like we're sharing all this information for them. Sometimes I feel like with employees, you almost need to connect the dots. Remember, we talked about that last week. We had the situation last week. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And sometimes you have to lead your employees to the well, I guess I'll say, to help them see, yeah, you are learning, you are developing those skills. Never underestimate the impact that you can have on your employees. You have, especially if you're their direct leader, you have the most interaction with your employees on a day-to-day basis. For some smaller nonprofits, I know you guys are working so closely together. If you're in any kind of leadership role, and even if you're not in a leadership role, honestly, the way we interact with each other, the way we compliment each other, maybe we give people some feedback, the way we share information, all this stuff it's the day-to-day stuff that can make all the difference. The senior leaders of the organization may set the highest level of goals and vision, but it's the ones that are leading the employees at the direct level that are executing it. Or it may be your entire team is executing it, but you can't do it without your employees. So just kind of keeping those things in mind. What's your culture look like? We hear a lot about culture. We've been telling organizations for years, you need to re-recruit your employees every single day. And you do that through culture, through transparent communication, through striving for some work-life balance. Especially with Gen Ys and Gen Zs, who we often call the millennials, and the Gen Zs and the upcoming generations, they want to have some balance. They want to be able to meet not only their professional priorities but also their personal priorities. How do we do that? How can your organization do that? I'm a big fan of stay interviews. Are you talking to your people? Why do you work here? What do you like about it? What can we do better? We hear a lot of organizations that do exit interviews. You're asking them this as they're walking out the door. Let's ask it while they're still there, and we can do something about it to keep them. So yeah, I'm a big advocate of stay interviews. Are you able to empower your employees? Are you able to educate them enough, help them understand the whole picture of things, to help them be part of the decision making, to help them be part of what's the direction of the organization? And then also, of course, that focus on mental health and wellness. There was a survey recently, 82% of employees are at risk at burnout at the end of 2024. And a lot of times organizations overlook the role that the supervisors and managers and that first level, mid-level leaders can play in that. Even just might be working hard and they might be stressful. That doesn't mean, there are things that managers and other leaders can do to help mitigate that and to still be able to provide that positive experience. Not saying stuff's easy, but there's a lot of things we can do on a daily basis to help employees feel appreciated and like they're contributing. So I want to use the chat a little bit. What are some qualities of an ideal leader that you look for? Whether you're an employee, whether you're another leader, what are some qualities of an ideal leader that you look for? And Max, I don't think I have you on the chat, so I'm going to rely on you on this one.
Yeah, I'll monitor it here. If people can find the chat, I believe it's in the bottom right hand of your screen. And it should be the same as the Q&A. So,
yep.
By the way, if you do have questions, put them in the chat as well. I'll try to get to them as we're going through. And then if we have time at the end, we'll circle back to any questions that we missed.
So anybody have any thoughts on what are qualities of an ideal leader that you're looking for?
Okay. Someone says honest, open, clear and direct.
Yeah.
Kind.
I like the kind. We can be clear and direct and still be kind.
A couple people put the specific word empathy.
Yeah, very much so. And we are, like I said, I guarantee every person on this call, we all have our stuff going on in life, right? Whether it's a work issue, whether it's personal, family, something else going on, we all have our stuff. And we need to be a little empathetic of that, and to going back to that, let employees know we care about them.
Especially this time of year with all the flu and the colds.
Oh yeah, yes.
Here, someone else says timely communication.
Yep, and responding. If you say you're going to do something, respond back and do it, and provide the information. Mm-hmm. All of those are great. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your responses. Some of the things that we can do as strong leaders are also, involve your employees in the problem-solving process. Well, hey, here's the issue that we have. What do you guys think? Because very often our employees are ones that are doing the day-to-day, right? They're in the trenches. What do they think? Let them take the lead. They're the ones that are doing the job. And oftentimes they know what's best, or they know what works and what doesn't work. Making sure that they're part of any change. There's been tons and tons of change in the last couple of years. And especially I think with it as more executive orders come out, as more things are impacting organizations, there's going to continue to be change. And keeping your employees informed, being transparent, helping them, allowing them to be involved in change. Building trust is also something. Somebody mentioned honest. That is a significant piece of being able to be a strong leader. That communication that was mentioned, you know, work with your employees so that they can feel confident in handling a problem. You know, such a key role for leaders is to provide that big picture perspective. Do employees know where their role fits into the organization? Do they know what they do? They may seem like, oh, well, I'm just in the mailroom, or I'm just answering the phones at the front desk. There's no just about it. That's important. And where do they fit in? How does their role impact other roles in the organization? Do they understand the why factor? Anybody who's ever sat in on a training of mine knows that this is something I harp on. Why are we doing it that way? It's more than just because Kathleen said so. What does it impact? Help them see that big picture of why that form is important, why this process is important, all of those kind of things. You know, other areas to consider are developing your employees. Employees want to learn. Everybody across the board, across generations, people want to learn. So how can you do that with your employees? Are there pathways within your organization? I appreciate, depending on the size of the organization and the structure and things, sometimes there are career pathways as in advancement opportunities and things, sometimes not. It all depends on the organization. You know, what does professional development mean to your employees? I have employees tell me, well, I want, you know, we'll do a survey and I get, well, we want professional development. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean going to a seminar? Does that mean going to a workshop or a conference, a training? Do they just want to shadow somebody? What is that professional development? Do they want to get a certification? Have the conversation with your employees. You know, look for opportunities where they might be able to work on a new project or work with new technology. That's learning. We've got a development plan that we'll share a lot of times. And if you want to email Max or I, or if you want to email me at the end, I'm happy to share out the development plan that we use. They just kind of help start that conversation. You know, but have the conversation with your employees. What do you want to learn? Are there other areas of the organization that you want to learn more about or you'd be interested in? Having those conversations with the employees, but making a point, because again, employees want the opportunity to learn. Some ways you can do that with your employees can be quite simple. Just, hey, you're really good at that. Do you mind helping train the new employee? You know, this is definitely a strength of yours. You know, oh, hey, I'd like you to represent our department on this particular committee, or I'd like you to represent our organization. This is a great event that would be good for our organization. Can you go represent us? I mean, let me show you what I did. So as you're problem solving, share that information with your employees. You know, I saw this workshop and I thought of you. I thought you might enjoy it. You know, I'd like your opinion on something. All of these things are things that you can do to develop your employees. And most of these don't cost anything. Even the workshops or attending an event or something representing your organization, many of those don't have to cost anything. But they're all things that can be meaningful to employees. It's all in how you frame the messaging on it. As we look at training and things, you know, different types of training that we're seeing organizations requesting or organizations looking for. If you are an organization that you promote from within, or maybe you've got people that are moving into a management leadership role, making that transition can be challenging. And we get a lot of demand for training on making that transition. You know, how can I still preserve the relationships that I have, but be able to effectively move into that leader role? Giving positive and constructive feedback. This is one of the hardest things that we hear from leaders at all levels, is how to have those conversations and making sure they're comfortable in having those conversations. For leaders, we've talked about empowerment and development. Empowerment and delegation. What's the best way to do that? Yes, we want to empower our employees, but we don't want to just do it randomly. We need to make sure they're prepared and they've got the knowledge to do it. Also having critical conversations. For employee training, things like emotional intelligence is that's that part of being aware of how you're impacting others. Being aware of how your own emotions can impact you and can impact others. Conflict management or navigating conflict, navigating change has been a big one. Resilience is one that we are hearing more and more about for all levels of the organization. We're also hearing, I don't have it on here, but we're also hearing more about workplace civility and how do we create, workplace civility. So shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to just touch on remote versus in-person. We're hearing a lot of it. We're hearing a lot. The federal government is calling all the federal employees back. We're hearing the big headlines from the big organizations and things calling employees back. I guess I'm an advocate of there's no one size fits all, and really look at it as it applies to your organization and consider all the angles. What are the needs of the organization? How is being remote or having a flexible work environment, how does that impact communication or collaboration or productivity? What will, if you make everybody come back to the office, what will the impact be on your retention and your employee morale? Are you willing to lose your best employee because they don't want to have to come back to the office? Those are the questions you have to ask. The blanket orders of everybody come back to the office, I'll be honest, kind of scare me, because I think there's an assumption made that, the employees we don't want won't come back. You better be ready for your best employees not to come back too. Are you prepared for that? Just bottom line, if we're talking remote, in-person, hybrid, whatever it is, be intentional about the decisions that you're making and just consider how it's impacting your organization and what the impact on engagement is. So when we're talking about engagement, we talked about, again, hiring and retention and all of these things. There's a path. First of all, open lines of communication. Be transparent. Build rapport with employees, both employees and across staff and across the organization, at all levels of the organization. Build rapport. That's going to lead to help you have stronger relationships. And then through that, you're also building trust. When you build trust as a leader, you build credibility. Even trust as a leader, but also as an employee, you build credibility. And when you build credibility, you build influence. And when you build influence, you build higher employee engagement. So all of these things kind of fit together. I wanted to spend, as I mentioned, I can't do a the landscape of HR in 2025 without talking about AI in HR. And I guarantee you, when I put this information together last week, there's more, because this is one of those that AI is constantly changing. Full confession, I can't swear I've mastered all of it. But look for different ways. I try to approach it as, okay, if I'm doing a particular task, could AI help me with this? I actually have a sticky note on my computer or on my workstation at my office. Could AI do this? Could AI help me with this? From an HR perspective, we're seeing things like, can it provide some assistance in writing a performance review? I've had leaders use it to role play a difficult conversation. Could it be job descriptions? Could it be writing a development plan? There's the things you can do with AI in HR is limitless. The one thing that I will make sure and stress is that we cannot lose that. HR is human resources. We cannot lose that human element. There's one key piece to keep in mind. And, we can't just cut and paste a comment from AI into somebody's performance review. We've still got to put those human eyes on it. So just keep that in mind. But the biggest thing I find with AI is just have an open mind.
Okay. Another polling question. We have, two more, including this one. So how is your HR function handled? HR is incorporated into another function, whether that's a accounting or office manager, someone's wearing many hats. Managers handle their own HR, except for payroll and benefits. We have one dedicated person who handles all HR, or we have two or more people who make up our HR department. So leave that open for just a little bit. I know we're coming close on time, but we still have a couple minutes. So Kathleen, I love the one slide you had up there with like tips, where it was just, let me show you what I did, and different suggestions you can say to your employees. I love that. I was almost going to say, leave it up there for a minute so I could take a screenshot just to kind of post
I'm
that
happy
up
to share it with you, Max.
Yeah, please
it's
do.
not rocket science. It's not, sometimes we make it way more complicated than it needs to be. It's just being human and caring about people and, thinking about it. You mentioned you were interested in this. I'm known for sharing articles. I mentioned earlier, I read way too much. And if I know it's an area somebody's interested in, I'll share it. So it looks like we're good on the poll.
Okay.
So for a lot of folks, HR is incorporated into whether it's accounting, the office manager, the director, the executive director, whatever that might be. And that's not uncommon. Good for those of you who have more than two people in HR. So I think we're moving on to the next. So I'll leave this contact information up there for a second. But we also want to make sure for those of you who need CEU or need credit for the accounting piece. But if anybody has any questions or anything, or you'd like any follow-up comments,
I do see one in the question. Someone says they work at a small not-for-profit with only 5 employees, and so don't have a HR department in the traditional sense. But what HR resources would you recommend for a small team like that?
Sometimes if you have professional organizations that are relevant to your industry, sometimes they have resources. Depending on where you are, there might be, collaborative resources. We work with a number of different, whether it's a chamber that you might belong to or what have you. I'll give a plug. Our website has a lot of resources on it. strategichrinc.com has a lot of resources on it. If you're able to be a member of the Society of Human Resource Management, there's a lot of resources there. It's not easy. I totally get that. Those are a lot of the organizations we work with, are the small. And so it's, those can be the challenge.